This is an iHeart podcast.
Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right. We're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Rushing to fill their suitcases with last-minute travel must-haves like stuffed animals, candy, and their favorite fidgets, Levi and Ivy ran around the house full of excitement. They were on their way to see their cousins who lived a few states away, and they only had a few minutes before they had to leave. And it's important to know, this wasn't going to be a road trip in their family car. Nope. That day, they would be taking a trip on an airplane. Levi and Ivy love to fly and could have not been more excited. You don't want the plane to leave without you, do you? Called Levi and Ivy's dad as his kids ran in and out of their rooms. Just one more minute, shouted Ivy. I need to find my favorite bathing suit. It's already in your suitcase, honey, replied her mom from the living room. I need to find my baseball hat and sunglasses, said Levi as he ran to the top of the stairs. Has anyone seen them? His dad walked over to him and started to laugh as he pointed to his son's head. You're wearing your hat and your sunglasses are around your neck, he said. Levi raised his eyes up and saw the brim of his hat. Oh, thanks, Dad, he said as he turned and ran back toward his room. I'm going to start loading up all of our bags into the car. Please be outside in 5 minutes, said Levi and Ivy's dad as he grabbed a suitcase and walked downstairs. I can't wait until we're on the plane, said Ivy with a huge smile. Takeoff is my favorite part of the whole trip. Racing down the runway faster and faster, then all of a sudden you feel the wheels leave the ground and then zoom, you're off. I love soaring through the clouds, added Levi. And landing is so much fun too, because that means we'll be so much closer to seeing our cousins Stella and Jameson. Great point, said Ivy as she grabbed her backpack from her bed. I think I have everything I'll need. And if I missed anything, I can borrow something from Stella. The two very excited kids switched off the lights in their room, took one last look around to make sure they weren't forgetting anything important, and they ran off to the car to head to the airport. Once they arrived at the airport, it seemed like days before Levi and Ivy boarded the plane. But in reality, it was only a couple of hours. Once on the plane, they ran down the aisle, found their seats, and sat down right away. Their parents, on the other hand, were slowly making their way to their kids as they juggled everyone's carry-on bags. Excuse me, sorry, right behind you, said Levi and Ivy's parents as they bumped into other passengers while trying their best to manage all the bags they were holding. Levi, Ivy, can you please grab your bags? Asked their mom as she got a bit closer to their seats. Levi and Ivy didn't respond at first, as they were staring out the window watching other planes land and take off on the runway. Finally, they heard their mom calling their names, and they helped her with their bags. Hey, Mom, you should have asked for help earlier, said Levi calmly, taking his bag from his mom. Levi's mom just laughed as she handed over the bag. She put her carry-on in the overhead compartment above her seat and finally had a chance to sit down. Levi and Ivy did the same, and so did their dad, just as the plane was getting ready to pull away from the gate. This is going to be so exciting, Levi said with a huge smile. We'll be soaring through the clouds in no time. But first, we have to take off, said Ivy. We'll be racing down that runway in no time. Then, before we know it, we'll be playing with Stella and Jameson, added Levi as he stared out the window over Ivy's shoulder. Levi had agreed that Ivy could have the window seat for takeoff, and they would switch halfway through the flight so he could have the window seat for landing. As the plane pulled away from the boarding gate, they both sat back in their seats ready for an amazing adventure. However, they could have never imagined what exactly was waiting for them. The flight attendants began to get everyone ready for the flight by going over all the safety instructions. In case of an emergency landing, we'll follow these procedures, one flight attendant said before they went on to list out all the things they would do to make sure everyone was safe in that situation. Can you imagine if our plane had to make an emergency landing? Asked Levi to Ivy. I bet it would be pretty scary, but I'm sure it's nothing we have to worry about, replied Ivy as she continued to look out the window. Yeah, I'm sure you're right, added Levi. It's a beautiful day, perfect weather, and I'm sure nothing could go wrong on this flight. But as he said that, Levi had a feeling that he had never had while flying before. It was a little wave of nervousness that ran through his little body. He didn't think much of it, but he definitely noticed it. There's nothing to be nervous about, Levi told himself as the plane readied itself on the runway. Here we go, exclaimed Ivy in a whisper as the captain announced they were ready for takeoff. The engines revved, and as they got louder and louder, the plane started to go faster and faster. And before Levi and Ivy knew it, they felt like they were in a rocket blasting off to space. The wheels rumbled along the ground as the plane raced down the runway. Then all of a sudden, you couldn't hear or feel them anymore. We're off the ground, shouted Ivy to Levi over the roar of the plane engines as they started to climb into their cruising altitude. I feel like a bird. Levi's nervous feeling had gone away, and the feeling of pure joy and freedom took over. He felt like an eagle flying toward the clouds above. He watched the buildings and cars below on the ground get smaller and smaller as the plane continued to fly higher and higher into the sky. Then, after a few minutes, the plane leveled off, and the captain let all passengers know that they had reached 35,000 feet and that the rest of the flight should be smooth sailing. Shouldn't the captain say smooth flying? I mean, this isn't a boat, giggled Ivy. But that would be pretty cool if we were flying in a boat right now, laughed Levi as he took out a book to read. Ivy settled in too and took out a drawing pad to sketch for a while. The sun streaming through the plane window made a nice light for her to draw by. Levi read his book and everything was fine. Until all of a sudden, the light through the window got dim, and finally there was no light streaming in at all. What's going on? Asked Levi as he turned to look out the window. It shouldn't be getting dark out now. It's morning time. Ivy looked surprised as well and stared out the window at some very dark clouds. Are we okay up here? Asked Ivy, looking around to see if anyone else was seeing what she and Levi were seeing. Levi and Ivy's parents could tell their kids were getting a little nervous, so they quickly let them know that planes fly through storms all the time and everything would be okay. Just then, the captain hopped on the loudspeaker to talk to all the passengers. Hello, folks. This is your captain speaking. It looks like we're running into a little rough weather that just popped up out of nowhere. We should be flying out of it shortly, but until then, please stay seated with your seatbelts on. We may hit some turbulence, but it's nothing to worry about. What? Asked Levi as he looked at his parents. Turbulence. It's unstable air moving around the plane. It can make the plane ride feel bumpy, like driving over a rocky road, explained Levi's dad. We'll be fine. A bumpy road? In the sky? Asked Ivy to Levi. We've never had any turbulence on any of our other flights. Why do we have it now? Well, we have only flown twice before, and Dad said it's pretty common, so we should be fine, answered Levi. And who knows, maybe it'll be fun. I guess you're right, said Ivy. It's always fun when Mom and Dad drive down that bumpy back road when we go to Grandma Sherry's house. It feels like a roller coaster. And I love roller coasters, said Levi. So let's sit back and wait for the sky roller coaster to begin. Both Levi and Ivy were now a little excited about the possibility of turbulence, especially since their dad and the captain told them it was nothing to worry about. And they didn't have to wait very long to experience for themselves. However, when they did, it was definitely not what they expected. Hello, everyone. This is your captain again. We are headed for some bumpy airspace, so hold on and sit tight, he said as Levi and Ivy felt their first little bit of turbulence, which didn't seem like very much at first. That's nothing, joked Levi. This is like a kiddie roller coaster. Then the turbulence got a little stronger. Now it's kind of like a big kid roller coaster, said Ivy as she grabbed her brother's hand. I'm not scared or anything, just thought maybe you were and needed me to hold your hand. Levi's voice sounded shaky, and Ivy could tell he was nervous too. Yeah, that would be fine. You can hold my hand, Ivy. Are you two okay? Asked Levi and Ivy's mom from across the aisle. It's gonna be okay. Mommy and Dad are right here. They could tell Levi and Ivy were getting more and more worried as the turbulence got stronger. They were also getting a little worried as the plane shook and dipped in the sky. The turbulence wasn't stopping, and Levi and Ivy squeezed each other's hands as they looked over at their parents, who were trying to stay as calm as possible for their kids, not wanting them to see that they were getting a bit nervous too. Don't worry, kiddos, said Levi and Ivy's dad as he rumbled around in his seat. Just think of it like a big amusement park ride. Or think of that bumpy back road we drive down on our way to Grandma Sherry's house, added Levi and Ivy's mom. It'll stop in no time, I am sure of it. But the turbulence didn't stop. In fact, it got a bit worse. That's when the captain got back on the loudspeaker and told all passengers that he was going to have to make an emergency landing. Emergency landing? Shouted Levi to Ivy. Just like we were talking about before the plane took off. You said we had nothing to worry about. And you said the weather was perfect and nothing could go wrong on this flight, replied Ivy. I guess we're both wrong, said Levi. But I don't care about being right or wrong now. I just care about getting back on the ground safely. Me too, said Ivy as she gave her brother a hug. The flight crew went over the safety procedures again. However, this time, they weren't just talking about them. They were making sure that every passenger was doing exactly what they said. The captain told all passengers to stay calm and that they would be on the ground shortly. Levi and Ivy closed their eyes at first until curiosity took over and they both leaned over to look out the window. As they approached the ground, the plane broke through a layer of thick gray clouds. After breaking through the clouds, the turbulence thankfully stopped. But the emergency landing was still necessary because they could not continue to fly at their cruising altitude at such bad weather. Levi and Ivy stared wide-eyed out the window and could finally see the ground coming into view. But it wasn't what they thought they were going to see. Ivy, are you seeing this? Asked Levi. I don't think we're landing at an airport. At least not any airport that I've ever seen. As Ivy and Levi took a closer look, they couldn't believe what they saw. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a magical forest where the trees shimmered with color-changing leaves. Glowing crystal blue rivers painted watery lines across the land. Why do you think the captain is landing the plane here? Asked Levi. And before Ivy could think of an answer, the captain was back on the loudspeaker. Everyone, I don't know how to explain this, but it looks like we'll be landing in began the captain, trying to find the words to explain what he was seeing. A magical forest! Blurted out Levi and Ivy. But by the time they had let everyone know where they would be landing, they felt the wheels of the plane bounce off the ground and begin to roll. The plane was tearing through the forest, but unbelievably seemed to be avoiding every tree, river, and mountain in its path. This place is really magic, whispered Levi to Ivy as they watched the beginning of a magical adventure unfold outside their window. But if they thought that was amazing, they had no idea what was waiting for them outside the plane. However, they would soon find out. The plane zoomed along with the captain in complete control the whole time. The landing was surprisingly calm for touching down in a magical-looking forest with no runway, and Levi and Ivy were mesmerized by what they saw outside their window. So mesmerized, in fact, that they didn't notice what happened in the plane. This is amazing! Take a look, Mom and Dad! We're in a magical forest! Exclaimed Ivy. Have you ever seen so many flowers or so many beautiful colors? Asked Levi with a huge smile on his face. Happy to be on the ground, Levi and Ivy turned all their attention to the world outside the plane. They were both so excited to get out and explore if they could. However, as they continued to tell their parents what they were seeing, they noticed, after a little while, that their parents weren't answering them back. Mom, did you hear me? Called out Ivy. Look at that river, it's glowing. But no response. Dad, are you two listening to us? This place is amazing, asked Levi as he finally turned to look at his parents. That's when Levi and Ivy both noticed that something strange was going on. Yes, something even stranger than their plane making an emergency landing in a magical forest. Everyone else on board, every other passenger seemed to be frozen. No one was moving or saying a word. They were all just sitting in the plane motionless, including Levi and Ivy's parents. Mom, Dad, can you hear us? Called out Levi and Ivy as they stood in the aisle of the plane in front of their parents' seats. But they still didn't answer. Oh no, said Levi. Something is really wrong here. And before Ivy could react to what was going on, a shimmering light filled the inside of the plane cabin. It was blue and purple and green and streamed in through the windows, flooding the plane with bright lights and colors. And that's when Levi and Ivy met her. "Please don't be scared," said a quiet voice that seemed to sail out of the light. "My name is Luma, and we need your help." Levi and Ivy took a step toward where they heard the sound of the voice, and there she was, a tiny fairy with silver hair and the most piercing blue eyes. Her skin glowed like the forest around them, and Levi and Ivy instantly knew they were in for an adventure. "Hi, Luma. I'm Levi, and this is my sister Ivy," said Levi. "Where are we, and who needs our help?" Luma looked relieved that Levi and Ivy were so nice and willing to talk with her. She only hoped now that they could help. "You've landed in a magical land. This forest is my home," began Luma. "It's enchanted, and the fairies, gnomes, and animals that live here are all magic. We've lived here in peace and harmony for thousands of years. But for the last few months, we've discovered that there are creatures that want to take over our land and use it for magic only for themselves." Levi and Ivy leaned in closer to hear every detail. "So is that why we're here?" asked Ivy. "Did you use your magic to create that storm and land our plane here so we could help you?" "That's right," said Luma, looking down. "I'm so sorry, but we didn't know what else to do. The wise wizard that lives here thought someone on the plane could help, and thankfully, as soon as it landed, I saw the good in the two of you. Also, you may have noticed that we put a little frozen spell on everyone else just so we could focus on the two of you. We hope that's okay." "And who is we exactly?" asked Levi. "Follow me," said Luma as she led Levi and Ivy off the plane and into the forest. A large inflatable slide was now attached to the side of the plane to allow Levi and Ivy to get back down to the ground. And as soon as they reached the bottom of the slide, they were surrounded by all different types of creatures. There were other fairies like Luma with glowing skin and animals of every kind. There were gnomes wearing giant hats that covered their eyes, but not their giant smiles. Everyone who Levi and Ivy saw looked friendly and welcoming and also very happy to see them. "Can they help us, Luma?" called out one of the gnomes. "Well, that's up to them," said Luma, reluctant to answer for Levi and Ivy. "Can you help us?" Levi and Ivy then looked at each other, and in an instant, they knew their answer. "We'll try our best, Luma," they said as the crowd that had gathered around them erupted in an applause. "But what do we need to do?" asked Levi. Luma then walked Levi and Ivy over to the edge of a beautiful sparkling river and told them the situation they were in. "As I told you before, our forest home is enchanted, and it's what gives all of us our magic," Luma began. "But our powers have been weakening over the last few months, and that's because a group of mischievous creatures known as the Gleams have come along to take our forest from us. And with that, all of our magical powers. They want to use the forest power for their good only, and don't care about the community or honoring the enchanted forest and all the amazing power it holds." "Wow, we're really sorry to hear that," replied Ivy after hearing Luma's story. "Yes, and unfortunately, the only way to get your plane back in the sky and flying is to use our magic," said Luma. "I'm sorry I didn't think of that before I created the storm and brought it down to land here." "So what you're saying is if we don't stop the Gleams, then we're all stuck here forever?" asked Levi. Luma just nodded her head and then showed great excitement, saying, "But I know you two can help us. I felt it as you were flying over our forest. That's why I chose you and brought your plane here." Levi and Ivy knew they had a difficult journey ahead of them, but it was an important one. They had to help Luma and all the fairies and gnomes that lived in the enchanted forest. They were excited and happily joined Luma on her quest to find the Gleams and stop them from stealing the forest's magic. "But what will happen to everyone else on the plane?" asked Levi before they headed off into the forest. "They'll be just fine," answered Luna reassuringly. "When we stop the Gleams, which I know we can, I'll use my fully recharged magic to put your plane back up in the sky. Then everyone aboard will wake up as if they just had the best nap ever. No one will even remember landing here. Except you two, of course. And no time will have passed at all. Your flight will still be right on time." Levi and Ivy were happy that their parents and everyone else aboard the plane were safe as they set off to find the Gleams. And it didn't take long before Levi and Ivy knew they were on the right path. It sounded like giggling, and it was getting louder and louder as Levi and Ivy followed Luma down a dimly lit forest trail. It's so strange how the part of the forest where we landed was so bright and colorful, and this part is so dim and dreary, said Ivy. That's because the Gleams have taken almost all the magic from this part of the forest, answered Luma. With the magic goes the light and color. They have been using the forest magic only for themselves, like wishing for anything they want to eat, whenever they want it, or creating toys and games by snapping their fingers, and even wishing for gold and jewels with just the snap of their fingers. Everything Levi and Ivy were hearing just sounded selfish and wrong. It made them want to help Luma and the rest of her forest friends even more now. Why not share all of that with everyone in the forest? Asked Levi. Yeah, why keep it all for yourself? Added Ivy. Especially knowing that it's taking the forest magic and beauty away? That's just wrong. You're very right, said Luma. My friends and I have always used the forest magic to do good. We share everything and never ask for too much. Just to live in this wondrous, enchanted place is our greatest wish. Not food or toys or gold. And as Luma finished talking, that's when they saw it. Levi and Ivy and Luma made their way around a bend in the path and saw where all of the forest magic was going. The light was almost blinding as the magic area was being concentrated into a little spot. And around that spot stood the Gleams, making wish after wish and draining the forest of its magic and power. We wish for more cookies, called out a Gleam creature as cookies rained from the sky and landed on the mountain of sweet treats that already looked to be enough to feed every creature in the forest for years. We want more toys, called out another one of the Gleams as they walked through a sea of toys that had already been wished for and were not even being enjoyed or played with. More gold and jewels for us, called out another group of Gleams as they used the shiny trinkets to skip across a shimmering, brilliant blue lake. Levi and Ivy and Luma couldn't believe what they were seeing. Follow me, whispered Luma as she led Levi and Ivy around the lake and out of the view of the Gleams. Luna told Levi and Ivy to jump on a giant leaf and sailed them over to a floating island where they met another extraordinary character in their marvelous adventure through the enchanted forest. Levi, Ivy, this is Walden. He's a very wise wizard who is as old as the forest itself, exclaimed Luma. He's been working on a way for us to get to the forest back from the Gleams, and that's why we brought you here. Hello, Levi and Ivy, said Walden in a deep voice. It's the power you hold that will help us get our home back. We're all running out of magic, even me. And we need 2 not magic creatures that won't be affected by the power that the Gleams now have. Each day they stay, they weaken us all a bit more. You don't require magic to function, so you're our only hope. Levi and Ivy knew the situation was getting serious after they talked to Walden. After hearing his stories, they said again that they would help in any way they could. Then Ivy had an idea. Can I have a minute to talk with my brother? Asked Ivy. Walden and Luma said absolutely and hoped that they would return with an answer to the problem they had been dealing with. Levi, doesn't this at all remind you of that time in school when Tommy and Katie collected all the recess points and then only used them for the recess activities that they wanted to do? Asked Ivy. Totally, answered Levi. Even though every time someone else in the class got the recess points, they would take a vote and see what activities would benefit the whole class. Yes, Tommy and Katie were being selfish and thinking only of themselves, making everyone else in the class sad, said Ivy. That's what the Gleams are doing. The magic in the forest is like recess points. Luma and her friends always used the forest magic for the good of everyone. And in doing that, everyone had a great time living here. And the Gleams are doing the exact opposite, added Levi. They're using their recess points, or in this case, the forest magic, only for the things that they want. And they're the only ones having a good time. That's when Levi and Ivy remembered what they did to change that situation back at school with Tommy and Katie. They just hoped it would work to help with the Gleamers. They returned to Luma and Walden, who were waiting patiently to hear if they had any ideas. I think we need to use kindness to deal with the Gleams, said Levi. We need to talk with them and let them know that what they're doing is affecting everyone who calls the forest home. We've tried to talk with them, but they're just so big and loud. It's like they didn't even know we were there, answered Luma. Well, we're big kids and we can handle those Gleams, said Ivy with great confidence. Levi and Ivy smiled at Luma and Walden, promising that they would do all they could. Then they asked to be led back to the Gleams. After a short leaf boat ride across the lake, they were back at the bend in the path where they first saw the Gleams making wish after wish with the forest magic. "Let's go do it," said Levi to Ivy. They gave each other a high five and walked toward the Gleams and all their piles of sweet treats, toys, and gold treasure. "Who are you?" called out one of the Gleams, dropping a giant chocolate chip cookie on the ground. "What are you doing here?" shouted another, tossing a gold bar in the river. "Let me handle this," said the biggest Gleam of all of them as he walked toward Levi and Ivy with a not-so-welcoming look on his face. "What are you doing in our forest?" That's when Levi and Ivy introduced themselves and explained to the Gleams what and who had brought them there. "You're stealing all the magic from this enchanted forest by making wish after wish for things that only benefit you," began Levi. "But while you're doing that, you're also taking the magic away from the fairies and gnomes that live here. Your selfish actions are going to force them to leave the home they love, and they've lived in it for thousands of years," said Ivy. "Do you even know that? You need to think of others instead of just thinking about yourselves." The biggest Gleam stood in front of Levi and Ivy, listening to every word they say. He was silent for quite a while, which made Levi and Ivy question how their conversation was going to end. "No one has ever explained it to us like that," said the biggest Gleam. "We didn't realize that by making our wishes for the forest magic that we were taking magic away from anyone else. But on the other hand, we love all this stuff and it wouldn't be fun to give it up." And just like Levi and Ivy told Tommy and Katie at their school, they didn't have to give up all activities that they liked. They just had to include everyone in the class on making the decision. That way, everyone had a voice and everyone got something they want. So a good way to start would be to give the fairies and gnomes of the forest an apology for what you've done and stop making so many wishes. Then I think everyone will be okay with you staying here, said Levi as he looked over at Luna and Walden, who were nodding their heads in agreement. It's not that we want you to go. It's that we want you to stop using all of our magic, said Luma. And you don't need so much of everything. You'll learn to enjoy things more if you don't have them around all the time, because then they'll be special. The Gleams all realized at that moment that they were wrong, and they had some work to do to make everything right with the fairies and the gnomes that lived in the forest. Walden knew what to do and helped the Gleams to reverse their wishes, which would bring back the forest magic. He helped them send back the sweet treats, the toys, the games, and all the golden jewels, saving only their favorites that the Gleams promised to share with the fairies and gnomes of the forest. You must believe me that there are so many priceless treasures in this enchanted forest that exist already for all of us to share. Just allow yourself to experience this place without wishes and you'll see that, assured Walden as he talked to the Gleams. And one by one, the piles of things went away. The light in that part of the forest grew brighter and brighter until its enchanting glow touched every leaf and flower that was now shimmering and sparkling once again. Instantly, the other fairies and gnomes felt their magic returning. And when Levi, Ivy, Luma, Walden, and all the Gleams walked back to the plane where they had been waiting, they cheered with excitement knowing the plan had worked and that Levi and Ivy had restored the forest magic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome, very, very welcome, answered Levi and Ivy. It was our pleasure to help you. Luma and Walden explained what had happened to the group and introduced the Gleams to everyone. They apologized for their selfish ways and made a guarantee that as long as they were in the enchanted forest, it would not take its magic. By this time, Levi and Ivy knew they had only one other thing to do: get their plane back up in the sky so they could continue their trip and see their cousins. We can't thank you enough, Levi and Ivy, said Luma and Walden. And now that we get to have all of our magic back, we can get your plane back up in the air and on your way. Levi and Ivy said goodbye to all their new friends and ran up the slide to get back into the plane. Once on board, they rolled up the slide, closed the door, and prepared to fly up, up, and away. Everyone on the plane was still frozen, but Luma said they would stay that way until the plane was safely back up in the sky. So on the count of 3, Luma waved her hands, which lifted the plane back into the sky, and with a swirl of Walden's wand, it zoomed forward through the clouds. Then, only a few seconds passed before everyone started to unfreeze, feeling as if they had the best nap ever. Hello, everyone. This is your captain speaking. It seems that we've flown out of that rough turbulence and won't need to make that emergency landing after all, said the captain over the loudspeaker. We'll be landing normally at our destination in no time, so sit back and enjoy the rest of your flight. Wow, what a great nap, said Levi and Ivy's parents. I feel so rested. That's great to hear, Mom and Dad, said Levi as he and Ivy looked out the window to see the last little trace of the enchanted forest disappear underneath the sea of puffy clouds. So did you two nap with all that turbulence? Or were you still a little nervous? Asked Levi and Ivy's dad. I hope it wasn't too scary for you, added their mom. Nope, not scary at all, said Levi with a little smile. I would say it was magical, said Ivy as she gave her brother a wink and they stared out the window into the wide open sky. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun, Lively Lewis story with you.
This is an iHeart podcast.